Andrea Waner, and Bill Weitkemper. The third candidate, Jim Meyer, had a conflict and cannot join us today. Current Ward 2 Councilman Mike Trapp is not seeking re-election. Leslie Clay will moderate our forum again today, so I'll hand it over to Leslie.
Leslie, audio. We can't hear you. Okay.
I was eating lunch. Now that's why I was not on video for a while. I got to the ground rules. We have, and we may be a little bit more generous with time because we only have 2 people here to speak. But what we will do is I will ask them to give an introductory statement of them about themselves, whatever they want to say. And I'll start out alphabetically, I guess. Both of you start with a W. So I bet Andrea's not used to being the first alphabetically, but she is. And give a 5-minute, as much as 5 minutes, to talk about yourself. And 30 seconds before the 5 minutes is up, I will hold up this. 10 seconds before the 5 minutes, the time is up, I'll hold up this. And if, at the end, I will call stop. And you will both have an opening statement. Then people can ask questions. And I'll just alternate who gets to speak first, answer the question first. The question hopefully is no longer than 30 seconds long, because I want to hear, and I'm sure everybody else wants to hear, what the candidates have to say. Then the candidates will have 2 minutes to respond. Again, I'll have this little signs, 30, 10, stop. And then the next question, I will go alternate who gets to speak first. Now apparently we go as long as 1:15. I'm not sure we will need to, but in any event, and near the end, I will stop questions and then give each one a chance to wind up what they have to say. And this time, since Andrea went first, I will ask Mr. Weitkemper to go first for the final say. And I don't see Mr. Weitkemper. I can't see you or hear you right now. And it would be nice if you could show us on video. And definitely we'll need to have you unmuted.
Is that better?
I can hear you. I can hear you. I can't see you, but I can hear you.
How do I get the picture up? What do I do to get the picture up?
At the bottom of the screen, choose start on the video. Next to mute, there's stop and start video.
There it is. We see.
Good job.
Do I have to turn it off every time? Mute.
Well, all right. So we'll start with Ms. Waner, who will give us her up to 5 minutes of introductory. Okay.
I assure you, I will not take your whole 5 minutes. I'm fairly concise. So first of all, I just wanted to thank you all for inviting myself and the other candidates to come and speak with you at your meeting today. My name is Andrea Waner, and I am running to represent the 2nd Ward on Columbia City Council. I'm running because our community needs a council person that is focused on protecting public health, preserving good paying jobs, and creating a community where everyone has the opportunity to prosper. We need to move beyond rhetoric and promises to be implementing real policies that benefit each of our lives in real and tangible ways. COVID-19 continues to have an impact on our community, though we are hopefully in the home stretch there. It has acted as a magnifying glass to the inequality that exists in Columbia and has underscored our need for action. I'm a mother to a 5-year-old named Henry. I know what it's like to have to balance the risk of bringing illness into our home while still going to work. Families throughout Columbia are fighting to stay in their homes, keep the lights on after losing their jobs or having income dramatically cut. Parents are balancing full-time jobs, caring for children as our schools go in and out of virtual learning and those paths change. Our healthcare workers are having to care for people from all over the region with limited resources. So now more than ever, we have to lay the foundation for a Columbia where everyone has the opportunity not to just get by, but to truly prosper. And what that means to me is neighborhoods with well-maintained infrastructure, childcare, support for children and families, and policy focused on creating quality jobs. It also means city government that is transparent, accountable, and accessible. I believe that this vision for Columbia is not out of reach, and it's something that we can work together to achieve. And I believe that as community leaders, you all are in a unique position to help guide our city policy towards the goal of creating a community where all can prosper. And I look forward to working with each of you as we go forward. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Now, Mr. Weitkemper, you're on.
It seems the city of Columbia may be afflicted with many of the same problems as it was the last time I ran for a council seat 8 years ago. The problem seems to be management. Is it incompetence or something far worse? Only a thorough state audit may determine which it is. The status quo of that's the way we've always done it is not acceptable. Government must be constantly looking for a better way of doing everything. Continuous improvement must be government's motto. Government only becomes complex and complicated when good ordinances, laws, policies, and procedures are not developed, adopted, kept up to date, and consistently applied. If there is any deviation from an ordinance, law, policy, or procedure, it must be addressed. Transparency and honesty must be the rule. Anything less is unacceptable. We must be able to trust and have faith in our government to do the right thing every time.
All right, that's the end, I suppose. All right. And so we would be ready for questions, and I would like to add that all questions will be answered by both candidates. So if you want to address it to one candidate, you're going to have to rephrase your question so that it's applicable to both of them. So are there any questions? And of course, I can always depend on Herb.
I enjoy hearing resumes from candidates. Would you each offer a brief profile resume of yourself as person in this race?
Okay, this time we're going to start with Mr. Weitkemper.
When I was born in Mexico, Missouri, I grew up on a farm in Centralia. I spent most of the time with my grandparents. I moved to Columbia in 1964, graduated from Hickman High School. Then I moved back to the farm, helped my grandfather farm. He passed away the night of my senior party at Hickman High School. I went to Kirksville State Teachers College in August of '68. And I spent not much time there. I didn't study very hard. I moved back to the farm and then moved to Kansas City, worked for Panhandle Eastern Pipeline Company for 4 years, 4.5 years. Moved to Columbia and worked for Engineering Surveys and Services for Jim Reed for 2.5 years. Then started my career with the City of Columbia in 1974 for 37.5 years. And I was retired in 2012. And that brings us up to almost to the day. Thank you.
Okay. All right, that's it. All right, Ms. Waner.
Sure. So I was born to a teenage mom here in Columbia in 1987. So I'm younger, which is okay. And then I was raised in St. Charles County. I graduated from Francis Howell North High School there. I attended the University of Missouri for my bachelor's degree. I have a bachelor's degree in English. And then I went back to obtain my master's degree. And I have a master's degree in public policy and public affairs from the Truman School there. I have served as the chair of the Human Rights Commission for the city for the last 3 years. I've been on the commission for 4 years in total. Most of my work experience has been in the public sector. So currently I work at Central Methodist University. I'm the director of advancement and operations. So I am in charge of designing strategy for all of our fundraising and solicitation efforts for scholarships. I also am in charged with doing all of the contact tracing and case investigation for COVID-19 on our campus for our students. Prior to that, I worked for a nonprofit called the Institute for People, Place, and Possibility, and they are a health policy and communications community health improvement organization. And so I was their communications manager. So I worked with nonprofits and government entities across the country to help them go through their community health improvement processes and tell the story of their community and the things that they needed to work for change. Prior to that, I have been employed at the City of Columbia as well, at the Columbia-Boone County Department of Public Health and Human Services as the Public Information Officer, and helped with emergency response and preparedness planning there. I do a lot of consulting work on the side for communications and social media and health policy as well.
You just got in under the wire. Okay.
Woo.
Woo. And I don't know if I said, but I'm giving you each 2 minutes to answer your questions. All right, Mr. Robinson, your hand is up, and you are.
Having heard about the experience that both of you had, a question occurs to me. How do you assess the relationship between Columbia, the city, and our educational institutions here, especially our institutions of higher education? And do you see needs for improvement?
Okay, Ms. Waner, you go first this time.
Sure. So I think we have a pretty good relationship with the universities and the higher education systems here in town, but I think there's a lot of room for progress. We are in a really unique position to have so many smart, passionate, and devoted people in our community who are looking to use their skills for good, and willing to think creatively and innovatively about the way that we do things. I think right now, one instance that comes to mind is I know that Randy Cole for the city, when he's looking at affordable housing and community development block grant funding, he has worked with the Truman School to get a hold of master's students who are focused on this particular area to go through and figure out ways to improve our processes and way to implement things differently. I think if we continue to partner with organizations within, these institutions of higher education, we'll continue to get past, the way we've always done it, as Bill mentioned, and we can really work on creating things that work for everyone.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Weitkemper.
I think the journalism school definitely keeps the city on its toes. Seems like there's a reporter under every rock. That's sometimes bad, but most times good. It's good to have exposure and transparency. And that's what we get with reporters asking questions. So I think it's a good relationship that the university has with the city and vice versa.
Okay. Any other questions? And if somebody I can't see because you haven't put on your video, put it in the chat and somebody will bring it up to me for sure. All right, well, the only hand I see up is again, all right, Sue. How about Sue?
There is in the works now, a request that's going before the city council for Canton Estates, which is, I'm not sure just how many housing developments. The property is borders on Rockbridge State Park, It currently is under the county, one house every zoned for one house every 10 acres, and this would have 4 houses every acre. I would like, I want to know if you're paid attention to this and kind of what do you feel your role is? What do you want to see happen on new development in Columbia?
Okay, Mr. Weitkemper?
No, I haven't followed it, but is the development on city sewer?
It isn't currently, I don't believe.
It's not proposed to be either.
It's proposed to be.
I think that'd be the main concern. Is a concern for the environment. If it's on city sewer, there ought to be too much problem with it.
All right, that's your answer? Okay, Ms. Waner?
So I'm not intimately familiar with that particular proposal. I've seen it as an agenda item, but I'm not intimately familiar with the details. In general, when I think about development, I would say that infill is better than sprawling out because it means lower infrastructure fees for, the developers and healthier communities for all of us. It also makes the most sense over sprawling out that, would overextend our grid, and working on, I'm trying to think of like transportation issues and making sure that we have access to appropriate transportations and things like that. But ultimately, if we can find a way to have city council continuing to listen to the concerns of the constituents in that area and what their desires are and balance the process along with, what the developers have in mind. And in most recently, I think the model of discussing what developers want and what our residents are looking for and really having it being a give and take and really building consensus. I think that's the way I would perceive the city council to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions? Larry Brown?
Given that most of our needs for those that are homeless, houseless, or without adequate housing has been cared for through non-NGOs and primarily churches, what do you think should be the city's role in looking at the needs of our houseless citizens?
Okay. Andrea?
Yeah, so one thing I think that we can do as a city is to work on ensuring that we have affordable housing in our community and to work on ensuring that we are truly and adequately funding the services that those in our homeless community need the most. Looking at supportive services and wraparound services is hugely important. I don't know that it is our job to necessarily fix everything, but I think that it is our job to get a better understanding of what's going on in the environment and then working with all of the players in the field that are doing this work and getting a better understanding of what their needs are. And then, like I said earlier, about working with the university and the institutions, thinking creatively about how we can address these issues. So I don't want this to be something that goes away. The discussion, I don't want that to go away. I want us to continue to work on that.
Okay, and Mr. Weitkemper?
The city should make it mandatory for any homeless person arrested or taken to a hospital to be evaluated by a trained professional city employed counselor. The city counselor should then schedule counseling sessions with the homeless individual to determine what, if any, assistance or counseling the person needs to help them become a more productive citizen of the community. Many of the homeless were abused as children and have since developed substance addictions. With the right help, many of Columbia's homeless can become productive citizens. The homeless and oftentimes the families of the homeless depend on the city working with the community to provide the two things that many Columbia residents take for granted, like a warm, secure place to sleep at night and a warm meal to start and end their day.
Okay. Other questions? David Mallory.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. A big issue I hear a lot on Facebook here locally is trash pickup. Roll cart versus what we have now. I don't know what that's called. And some people say the city shouldn't be in the business of trash pickup at all. What are your thoughts on this issue?
Okay, Mr. Weitkemper, you could go first.
There are still many problems with the present system. Inferior bags, trash bags, and recyclables being left on the curb at residences. Residential trash being put in apartment complex dumpsters and commercial dumpsters. Trash scattered along streets, and many student residents, especially in the 6th Ward, at least judging from the pictures in the newspaper, using the wrong bags. The city indicated the reason why they stopped picking up curbside recycling last winter was because of a lack of staffing. The street division doesn't stop plowing snow because of a lack of staffing. The city reassigns qualified drivers from other departments to assist with snow removal operations when there is a lack of staffing. The lack of staffing was a red herring created by management. The city trash collection crews have by far the most physical job in the city. There is no more demanding job than picking up bag after bag weighing 50 pounds or more. It is much harder than picking up the previously half full bags of trash. Roll carts should be put back on the ballot for a vote of the people. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Waner?
So I support the goals of reducing waste in our community and having equitable utility systems, as well as protecting the safety of our city employees. I think while we haven't truly begun the pay-as-you-throw program, I think is what it's called right now, we need to be able to evaluate whether it's a successful solution or not. Every program is rough at the launch, and this is no exception to that, obviously. This solution incentivizes less waste while reducing risk to our solid waste employees. I believe that we should give it a chance to work while exploring other and better options. I believe it's crucial that we're able to revisit any and all solutions that we make as a city to evaluate whether they work or not and whether they are actually furthering the goals for the city. Whatever system we choose, we need to retain our city-owned utilities. As with privatization, the emphasis stops being on what the voters of Columbia want and starts being about the profit for private businesses. The voters of Columbia have spoken once on this issue, and I strongly believe that it's not the role of the council to overturn that decision, and that can set a dangerous precedent. I would support an initiative that is brought forth from the people and is representative of the will of Columbia voters. And if that means implementing a roll cart plan, that's absolutely how we should proceed.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and I should also point out, I didn't earlier, that the Missouri Reporter, you're welcome to ask questions too. We don't want you to just sit in the corner listening to all of us, but meanwhile, are there other questions? Yeah, I see Carl or Mari. Oh, it's Mari.
I just wanted to draw attention because Justin had posted a question in the chat, which I'll be happy.
Okay, let's see what it says. Come on, chat.
I can read it if you'd like. The Columbia and Boone County Planning and Zoning Commissions are preparing to draft a West Area Plan to guide development of a 30 square mile area west of the Columbia city limits. What do you believe are the most important factors to consider as the plan takes shape?
Okay, and this time, I guess Ms. Waner is the first to answer.
Sure. I think when we talk about expanding the boundaries of Columbia and the services that we offer, it's crucial that we remember that we're part of a larger community. Our focus on growth and investments in infrastructure need continual purpose and planning. Communicate, plan first, then implement. And a great example of that is the West Area Plan in the Columbia Imagine Plan, which has required joint planning with Boone County to further this idea of intergovernmental cooperation and area planning. When we are considering moving outward and expanding, we need to look at what the stress on our community is going to be, look at what the stress on our roads is going to be, overextending the grid, as I mentioned earlier, and looking at our infrastructure fees. I believe that we have a lot of properties and land within the city of Columbia, especially in the 2nd Ward, that we could work on using those that already exist to be able to build a more vibrant community than if we were to grow out into undeveloped areas.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Weitkemper?
The most critical infrastructure source has always been sewers. When it comes to annexation, I personally don't feel that sewers ought to be used as a carrot for annexation. The Columbia Wastewater Treatment Plant was built with user fees rather than tax dollars, so it belongs to the whole regional area. But density would be another factor that would be considered heavily, as well as zoning.
Okay, that's, thank you. Are there other questions? All right, now we got Carl.
Hi, I just wanted to ask a question. There has been, in the last year or so, there's been a bit of a controversy about performance audits and whether or not we ought to proceed with an overall performance audit with the state auditor, or whether we ought to hire a firm with an independent performance audit. And we've chosen, the city council has chosen the latter option, if you will. And we've had several reports from that performance auditor. And I'm wondering as to whether what the candidates think about the incremental approach versus the overall approach. That is, with respect to an independent auditor taking an incremental approach, or the state auditor taking an overall approach for the entire city.
Mr. Weitkemper.
As far as hiring the state auditor versus the auditor you hired, I think there are many, many ordinances that have either been incorrectly applied or just simply ignored by city staff. The report to the city by the firm that was hired to audit the finance and utility departments stated that the city's ordinances were overly detailed and that the ordinances do not easily allow management the flexibility necessary to adapt to changing environments. How overly detailed is ordinance 27111 electricity, which was adopted in 1964, and states each residential dwelling unit must have a separate meter through which electricity supply to the unit shall be measured for billing. Metering of electricity supplying more than one dwelling unit through a single master meter is prohibited. By 1967, management was exercising the flexibility necessary to adapt to changing environments by allowing master metering of residential dwelling units if the units were constructed on property that was zoned commercial. There is an ordinance that defines a residential dwelling unit in the city code. However, there has never been an ordinance that defines a commercial dwelling unit in the city code. Stormwater ordinance 12A-151 states where there is no electric, sewage, or refuse collection utility customer for a partial developed land, the stormwater utility charge shall be billed to the property owner. Is that ordinance overly detailed? My 26 years of owning and managing 64 rental properties, I never received a stormwater charge for a vacant unit. Was management exercising the flexibility necessary to adapt to changing environments by not billing the stormwater charge?
Okay. All right, Ms. Waner.
I think that any sort of audit, fiscal or performance, works to make the city operate in a more effective and transparent manner. In this instance, a performance audit will be crucial to regaining the trust from the public on how the city handles its finances. The internal audits we have been doing don't accomplish the goal of having fresh eyes on how we do business and commitments and comments from a disinterested third party. I believe a thorough and impartial audit is worth the cost, honestly. And a state auditor for an overall approach would be my preference. I think it eventually saves money, even though it costs a bunch up front, and because it would help us identify the problems and allow the city to avoid future duplication, fraud, abuse, accounts hidden in spreadsheets that we don't know about. That would be my preference.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Alice.
I just first have a statement. Andrea, thank you for your support for the pay-as-you-throw system. And perhaps we will evolve to a roll cart, which I personally would like to see, but the city made great strides moving toward that, needed to happen. But my question is really on public transit. We have made improvements in our public transit by offering it free to, I believe, under 18. There's been some talk about not continuing that till after COVID, which concerns me. And having been on Public Transit Commission, I know we tried to work to have greater relationships with the university to expand our public transit. So I thought you both could comment on what you see as our future for public transit.
Okay, this time I guess Ms. Waner is the first to answer.
I believe we have to work harder to expand public transit for communities that really rely on it to meet their transportation needs, which includes putting bus routes near new developments and employers. I believe we need to work to explore better ways to offer public transportation, to seek out innovative ways to leverage funding sources and multi-sector collaboratives in the name of equity for our community. Having affordable, convenient, and reliable public transportation is what we need to ensure our community can get back to work, school, and supporting our local businesses, especially now.
Public transit ought to be free for every resident. And they ought to have smaller buses, shorter routes, and electric buses. If you had electric buses, they would save money in the long run over repair costs.
Okay. I see Winfred Colwell.
Thank you. I would like to know what the candidates' opinions are regarding Columbia's Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. Are they familiar with this, and do they support the goals that the city has set for reducing greenhouse gases?
Mr. Weitkemper?
I believe the present plan calls for eliminating greenhouse gases by 2030. That's unachievable. And the next goal is 2040, and that's unachievable. The next goal is 2050, and that might be feasible. They need to, until a better reduction method is invented, and I'm sure it will be, you need to expand on nuclear power to reduce greenhouse gases. Thank you.
Ms. Waner?
Sorry, I had to turn my phone down. I'm at my desk. So climate warming and climate change is a serious problem for our country and the world at large. The ongoing threat needs dedicated resources and actions at every level of government, including local level. Currently, the City of Columbia has adopted the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan to address the risks of climate change, as well as implement a strategy to make a collective difference. Their work to develop this plan focused on activities to achieve the greatest emission reductions and to increase our community preparedness in a cost-effective and equitable way. I think that should be commended. Within the Climate Action Plan, I would like to see further movement on increasing energy efficiency funding options for families, building thriving public transportation system along, and have a more bikeable and walkable community.
Thank you. Any other questions? Larry Brown again.
So how are we doing in the relationship between law enforcement and minority populations? And a subset of that is, what's the relationship between the City of Columbia law enforcement and the county sheriff with regard to undocumented residents?
All right, Ms. Waner?
I believe our public safety employees are overworked. We should better support our public safety professionals by adequately staffing facilities and providing them with the safety equipment they need to better serve the citizens of the community and keep pace with growth, while also respecting the collective bargaining rights of those employees. I would like to see what kind of reallocation of duties is possible to both relieve the stress on our officers and then also fund critical programs and services aimed at reducing crime and getting at the underlying factors that can lead to crime. The solution to an overworked workforce of any kind is not to just blindly hire more people. Sometimes we need to look at what's being asked of our current staff and see if anything can be shifted elsewhere. I believe if we want to tackle crime, we need to address societal problems like poverty, mental health, homelessness. Crime isn't someone experiencing homelessness. These are issues that would be better served under the umbrella of public health, housing, education, youth services. As for the relationship with public safety and the Boone County Sheriff's Department and undocumented immigrants, this is something that I would like to look more into and don't have a firm enough grasp at the moment to provide you a solid answer, but it's something that I would like to look further into.
Mr. Weitkemper.
I think your question about the sheriff's department and the city would be worth considering, but I'm not sure which one of them would like to be in charge. I think there'd be a little squabble there. I believe the city of Columbia desperately needs more police officers and firefighters. Many of Columbia residents are very concerned about violent crime and do not feel safe in their own homes. Columbia also needs another fully staffed fire station in order to cut response times to all locations in Columbia to an acceptable level. I would take advantage of Article 12, Section 102 of the city charter and transfer all surplus revenue from the fiscal year 2020 from the Water and Light Department budget into the General Revenue Fund. I asked Sheila Main how much surplus revenue the Water and Light Department had in fiscal year 2020, but to date she has not responded.
Okay, Ms. Waner.
I answered that one first.
Oh, you did? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep, that's okay.
My brain's sometimes a little off.
It's Friday.
Are there other questions or anything on chat? Oh, well, Mr. Tillamook can always be depended on.
Me?
Did you call on her?
You call
Yes,
on
I
her?
call on her.
All right. I don't recognize my own name these days. Agedness, I'm sure. Some members of the Missouri State Legislature have expressed desire to do a Texas and prohibit counties and cities within Missouri from directing or even advising practices to restrict the flow of COVID, including prohibit mass, car masks and so forth. I'll give you options. Do you oppose this or do you very strongly oppose this?
All right, then, Mr. Weitkemper.
I think the city of Columbia, Boone County Health Department response to COVID-19 pandemic has been very good. One area of improvement that it would have been, I would like to have seen made, was likely due to the lack of staffing, was to have had better enforcement of the mandates like mask wearing and to have eliminated all the private gatherings and parties consisting of large groups of people, especially around the holidays. Columbia and Boone County was fortunate to have had an experienced, dedicated, professional staff to guide us through this pandemic. Overall, I think Stephanie Browning and her staff did a very good job. I have had the opportunity to talk to several small business owners during the past year, and not one has complained about the health department response to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, in my opinion, the job will not be done until the county of Boone has had no COVID-19 related deaths for 6 months. The health department must now concentrate on getting everyone vaccinated and to continue with all the recommended precautions and mandates before declaring victory over COVID-19.
All right, Ms. Waner.
I strongly agree with the pandemic control measures that were implemented by the Columbia Boone County Department of Public Health and Human Services. So I think that safely means I strongly oppose pulling a Texas, but I think it's important to note that we all want a return to normal. We want the economy and our schools to open. We want to protect our friends and our family from the pandemic. And, you know, this winter we watched as our local hospitals were near capacity because of the lack of similar measures in surrounding counties. If we had not taken the steps to slow the spread, we would have been without access to emergency and intensive care for non-COVID related patients. Each county is charged with making the decisions that are in the best interest of their community. And here in Boone County, our public health officials, with the support of the city and the county, took a science-based, fact-based approach to pandemic protocols. I think when we're looking forward, as we continue to lift the restrictions, we should be ready to help our local businesses get back on their feet. We need to find a way to waive fees, to allow businesses the flexibility to adjust to the limitations in place. We should uplift and reward our businesses that are being creative while following our safety guidelines. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, now we have Mari again.
My question has to do with our community has well-documented serious disparities between Black people and white people in income, education, health indicators, etc. What would you do as a council member to try to address those disparities?
Okay, Ms. Weiner?
Sure. So I believe that equity is the active commitment to fairness, justice, and equality in the formulation, the implementation, and the distribution of our public policy and public services. I think that our work surrounding equity has to be more than a checkbox in our process. It has to be a culture that we're willing to get behind, and reviewing our city policies through equity, I think, is a great place to start. We talk about health in all policies and what the unintended consequences on health are of our city policies. I think we need to review all of our city policies to determine what the unintended outcomes are and the impacts are on equity, diversity, and inclusion work in our community. And that means policies going forward and policies that we've passed before. So it's about ensuring our neighbors and family have the same access to services that other parts in our city have access to, and that's improving that's critical to improving the health of our residents. And so we really need to be committed to addressing systemic inequities that hold our community back, rather than just addressing what we have at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Weitkemper.
The average minority family faces many disadvantages toward becoming economically independent that the average white family does not have to face. At the top of the list are the biases and prejudices, overt discrimination, systematic and institutional racism, and many other related and intersectional forces that many minority families face. Then there are the issues of not owning a home, a no-parent or a one-parent household, the likelihood of not receiving an inheritance, the inability to borrow $3,000 from a friend or family member, having parents that don't have a high school education, the likelihood of not receiving a scholarship or financial assistance with higher education. These are just a few of the many disadvantages that the average minority family may face. As far as the next steps, I would advise to address the economic disparities. If I'm elected, 8 of the 17 platform statements I've developed are intended to reduce the disadvantages the average minority faces that the average white family does not have to face.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
No, not quite yet.
This is so much more relaxed when we only have 2 people on the panel. But all right, Mr. Robinson.
Both candidates have given us great ideas of further actions the city can do to improve everything really here. A lot of those ideas will cost some more money. This year, we've learned that federal COVID help has saved our budget from declining too much. But before COVID, we were concerned that sales taxes were not able to do its part in continuing to improve and guarantee what the growing city needs. So I guess with that background, my general question is, what are the prospects for future revenues? where are the opportunities or the problems?
Okay, Mr. Weitkemper.
City needs to cut their expenses and live within their budget. I have had to make hard decisions when it involved doing more with less. Although sewer is supported by a use tax, use charge rather than a sales tax, I can relate to doing more with less. For the first 8 years I worked for the city, I had 13 employees. I lost one employee when a regional wastewater treatment plant went online in 1983. I then had 12 employees for the next 26 years. I did not have a staffing increase for the first 34 years I worked for the city, but the number of public sewer stoppages went from a high of 152 a year in 1976 to a low of 7 a year in 2012. I managed to do more with less.
Okay, Ms. Waner.
The city's hands are currently tied with regard to internet sales taxes. So until the state passes a law that allows us to pass a local use tax for internet sales, we're unlikely to be able to make up that lost revenue. I'm interested in joining with other local governments to urge the Missouri legislature to pass a law allowing us to recover lost revenue. In the meantime, we should be exploring how other cities of similar size are dealing with this problem. This problem is happening all over the country and will continue to starve our local economy until a solution is found.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Wiley Miller.
Have to get unmuted here. Columbia is certainly not the most unattractive city I've seen. I'm talking about physical attraction now, but it's not the most attractive either. And being the kind of city we are, attempting to be a forward-looking, forward-thinking, forward-moving city, being attractive physically would be helpful as well. I wonder what your thoughts are about the physical appearance of the city and what you would want to do to try to make the city more physically attractive.
Ms. Waner?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Okay.
Sure. So can you define what you mean by physically attractive?
Well, I suppose beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I don't really know.
Very fair, very fair. I think the first thing that comes to mind is continuing to work with the Office of Cultural Affairs to really spruce up our areas. I'm thinking, when you say physically attractive, I'm thinking of like actual visual and artistic approaches to things. So our murals on buildings and public art on lease and installing those types of things. That's exciting to me because when I go to other communities, I went to San Antonio, gosh, it wasn't last year, it was the year before, and they have this gorgeous art outside that is on lease from the artist. I could see that being exciting and a way to draw people in to want to visit. As far as physically attractive in the sense of, you know, attracting and expanding businesses, I think there's a lot of room for growth and progress, and to partner with areas like Ready to come up with ways to develop in different areas, specifically because this is about the second ward. The second ward has a dense population and we have open spaces for development and not a lot of incentives for developers to focus on our area. I could see that changing.
Okay, and Mr. Weitkemper.
I think I mentioned I managed 26 or 64 rental properties for 26 years. At the same time, I worked for the city for 37 and a half years. One problem I think you've got is with the trash and litter, especially in the 6th ward. If you've ever seen one of those houses after a beer party on a Saturday night, it looks filthy. I handled my problem with trash and litter by giving the property owner or the property occupant a notice at 8 o'clock the next morning. And I expected to have all this trash and litter picked up by a certain time of the day. And it was done, or I'd call the police to have them arrested for littering. So I think that's one of the things you can do is work with the landlords a little bit closer to keep some of these problem properties cleaned up in a little better manner.
All right, thank you. I think we have time for one last question, if anyone has one. I don't see any hands. I don't see any questions. So we can just do a wrap up. And Ms. Waner was first last time, so Mr. Weitkemper, you're the first to give us a wrap up of your candidacy or whatever you want to talk on.
I'm surprised you didn't ask about. Sorry about that. I'm surprised you didn't ask about Swift Foods, but I've lived in Columbia for 49 years, 26 years in the 6th Ward, 14 years in the 4th Ward, and 9 years in the 2nd Ward. In my opinion, the 2nd Ward is the most diverse of any of the wards. It has the crown jewel of the city's park system, Cosmo Park. My wife was international president of all cosmopolitan clubs in the United States and Canada last year, and I am very proud of her. I'm also very thankful for all of her advice and help during this campaign. I love the city of Columbia, and if on April 6th you feel I am the best 2nd Ward candidate, I would appreciate your vote. If you do not live in the 2nd Ward, I would really appreciate it if you would ask a few of your 2nd Ward voters to vote for Bill. Thank you.
And Ms. Wainer?
Columbia is my home. There's a reason that I decided to buy a house and raise my family here. Our deep sense of community is what sets us apart from those around us. We are a dynamic blend of diverse, curious, and passionate residents. However, in order to create a Columbia where everyone truly has the opportunity to prosper, we have work to do. That means neighborhoods with well-maintained infrastructure, support for children and families, policy focused on creating quality jobs, and addressing the systemic inequities that hold all of us back. And the way that we do that is through a city council that is transparent, accountable, and accessible. I look forward to earning your vote. Thank you for your time today.
Okay, well, I thank you, and I see that Kristen Bowen had sent a message, which I agree. It says, thank you to both candidates for your participation today. I do appreciate it. We aren't going to be very much of a community unless we have people who are passionate and are willing to put their neck out to run for office. And I appreciate both of you for doing so. So I'll turn it back over to David Mallory, our president.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you to both of our candidates who were able to make it today. Appreciate the time and get to know both of you. Kathy, can you refresh us on who our speakers are for next week?